Welcome to the webinar, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Alexandra Alvarado. Some of you guys may know me. I am the Director of Education here at the American Apartment Owners Association, and I'm very excited to have a new speaker who is with Evolve Technologies come and talk to us about water energy consumption and how to make that more eco-friendly and cost-friendly for you and your rentals. So before we get started, I just want to point out a couple of things. The first is that this full recording is going to be available tomorrow. So if you need to see it again, which you might, there's a lot of information in the webinar. We'll be sending that tomorrow. And then also, we're going to be doing the webinar for about 45 to 50 minutes with a Q&A afterward. However, our speaker today, which I'm going to introduce in a moment, has told me that he really loves audience participation. So if you have any questions and you want to jump in and ask, go ahead and do that, and I'll shout out the questions to Troy, our speaker today, as they come in. So first, I'm going to just introduce Troy a little bit, and let's get started from there. So Troy Sherman, he's a serial entrepreneur, a product developer, and co-founder of Evolve Technologies. He spent the past 10 years immersed in the issue of behavioral waste while developing technologies to mitigate it, but without requiring behavior changes on behalf of the user. Troy has authored multiple white papers, conducted primary and secondary research, and has been invited to present his insights to key water and energy efficiency constituencies. That includes the Department of Energy, ResNet, Build It Green, ACEE, AESP, and ACI. If you guys know what those organizations are, they're all green energy constituencies. Evolve Technologies products are currently used as measures in the largest energy efficiency and weatherization programs throughout the United States. So we're very excited to have his expertise. And then I'm going to pass it along to Alan, who's also on the call. Alan also works with Evolve Technologies, and he may be fielding some of the questions. Alan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alexandra. I'm Alan Work. I lead the sales team at Evolve Technologies. Just real briefly, I wanted to mention two other names. That's Katie Norum and Norma Lee. They're both on the call. They're also Evolve reps. In the event that you decide you want to engage with us directly or learn more or evaluate a product or something like that, it would likely be one of the three of us that would be contacting you. So I just wanted to mention their names. Also want to mention on September 12th, Evolve will be at the AOA show at the LA Convention Center. So that's another opportunity to engage with us to learn a little bit more if you're interested. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Troy. Thanks, Troy.
Thank you, Alan. So everybody, thank you for joining us today. And Alexandra, thank you for the gracious introduction. So we'll dive in. One thing I really do want to point out before we get into this too deep is I love interaction. It would be awesome if I'm not up here just kind of chatting at you, running through slides for the next 45 minutes. So please, I would encourage you to ask questions. I think we're going to talk about a lot of things that and share information that you haven't heard before, you haven't seen before. So please help me make sure that I'm getting everybody who's listening what you want to get out of this, and that that we're moving forward in a way that everybody feels really comfortable that they're understanding the data. So I guess I will jump in. The name of the presentation is How to Reduce Your Rentals Water and Energy Consumption and Qualify for Green Loans. I'll also tell you that we're going to show you ways to do this while adding a tremendous amount of benefit to your tenants. And so I'm not talking about achieving water and energy efficiency by taking something away from you. I'm going to show you how we can do that by giving people more than what they have today. So first of all, we need to start with a little bit of background on the things that go into water and energy use in an apartment or in a home. And we're going to break these out into two different sides. One is a structural side. It's the structure that already exists within your buildings, and that would include things like the water heater, the plumbing lines, the mixing valves, basically everything that has to do with distance, volume, and velocity of the water. The structural stuff is really, really hard to change. It's hardwired, it's behind the walls, it's all there. And so we're dealing with this dynamic that we already have. But there is a number of things that are fairly easy to change, and those actually come along on the what I would call the behavioral side. I have a shower head that kind of sits in the middle here. What we're really talking about on a shower head is how do we regulate flow? What's the consumption of the shower head? Usually it's going to be measured in gallons per minute. But there's this whole other thing of how do we interact as users, people that take showers, take baths, how do we interact with that shower, and what does the structure do to our behavior? On the behavior side, there's really great opportunities for change. And so mostly everything that we're going to talk today is really how do I deal with the structure that I already have in place, which I can tell you is most likely very inefficient, and it has great impacts on behavior. So how can I address the behavioral side and really achieve something that isn't punitive, doesn't take water away from you, doesn't take energy away from you, but adds a ton of value in terms of convenience and efficiency for your tenants. So the first place that we want to talk about, and when we talk about water and energy efficiency, immediately everybody starts to think of low flow shower heads. So let's just do a little bit of history on where we're at with shower flow rates today. Essentially, you're going to see this chart over here. Off to the left-hand side, we have gallons per minute. Back in, let's say, pre-1992, there was no regulation really of flow rates. A shower head would flow as fast as it would flow based on the water pressure that was behind it. In 1992, the federal government came up with the Energy Policy Act, and that started to regulate shower head flow rates for the first time. And they regulated them at 2.5 gallons per minute. Basically, they said, hey, a shower head given, let's just call it a normal or a typical pressure inside someone's building, their apartment or their home, can't go more than 2.5 gallons per minute, which was a big change. And this was all back in the day when everybody said, oh my gosh, I don't want a low flow shower head. These things are terrible. Basically what happened is the federal government put together this regulation. Manufacturers weren't really ready for it. And so they didn't have shower heads that could perform really well at 2.5 gallons. However, a lot has changed since 1992. Many people may be familiar with WaterSense and the new WaterSense showers that have been coming out for several years. WaterSense today puts a limit on a shower head at about 2.0. In fact, it's hard to buy a shower head today if you just run down to your Home Depot or your Lowe's that's going to be anything better than 2.0. Basically, the market has basically come in line with what WaterSense has, which is a half a gallon more savings per minute than what the federal government allows. In California, for people that are in California, the situation is getting even, I'm going to call it worse. So California Title 20 went into effect for a new regulation on shower heads last July, so it's been almost a year now. You are not allowed by law to purchase a shower head in California that flows at a rate greater than 1.8 gallons per minute. And then if we talk about what's happening on the utility side of things, these are programs that our products are typically used in. The flow rates are even lower. The utilities will provide, and when I say utilities, I'm mainly talking about gas utilities, electric utilities, or dual fuel that sell both gas and electricity. Basically, they need to be providing products in multifamily that are below what the baseline is. And so we're seeing flow rates in utility-based shower heads, or shower heads that are going into apartment complexes within a utility program where the utility is subsidizing the cost of the product, from 1.5 gallons now to 1.25 gallons per minute. And so I think we all have to ask ourselves, we all love our showers. Are those types of flow rates really flow rates that are viable? Are people going to shower in those types of things? And what does this do to behavior and all of those types of impacts that it has ultimately on our water and energy efficiency? There does become a point where I don't have enough water to have a decent quality shower. And I would tell you, based on my experience in talking with people, we're already there. Once you get into the 1.5, 1.25, those are the products that are starting to get put in, but it's borderline whether that's going to provide an acceptable experience or people are going to revolt even more versus what they have in the past and say, just totally, I don't want a low flow shower. Which leads me into the next part here. The truth is, if you go and you survey people and you look what people are trying to buy in general, most people don't want low flow shower heads. I'll be honest with you, many times I don't want a low flow shower head either. If I take a look at Amazon and say, hey, what's the best selling products on Amazon? They're shower heads like this one that you see over here, where they advertise very blatantly that you can remove the flow restrictor out of them. People want high pressure, they want high flow. Up here in the top, you see this little report. It's a public understanding of sustainable water use in the home. This was done by a company in the UK, and you would generally think that a European or a UK-based survey would lean towards being more green or more energy efficient or water efficiency than what you might expect here in the States. Not true. What this report found in doing their research is that most people in the UK want what we would call a power shower. They want a waterfall falling on them while they're showering. I mean, let's be honest, a shower is something that we really enjoy. It's as much about relaxation and as much about comfort as it is about getting clean. And people don't like to struggle with a low flow shower head. A lot of times they don't like how they feel. They don't feel warm enough within them. They know that they're sacrificing, and sacrificing in the shower isn't something that we want to give up. What's really interesting in terms of behavior when people are looking for shower heads is they ignore the information on efficiency. And they basically, even if you give it to them, they won't take it into consideration. They just don't want anything to do with the low flow shower. The graph here at the bottom is taking a look at Google Trends in terms of keyword searches that people have. If you see the red line in here, that was actually Google Trends searches over the last 14, 16 years on low flow shower heads. You can see that it kind of peaks around 2008. That would have been the height of everything in the media regarding global warming and just general awareness. And so people were kind of signing up and saying, hey, I'm interested in doing something about that issue, and I'm willing to make a sacrifice. But then I'd guide you to the blue line. The blue line is people searching for high pressure shower heads. You can see now that in basically 2019, more people are searching for high pressure or high flow type of shower heads, that type of experience, than they're searching for low flow. And if you look at WaterSense, the yellow line, it doesn't even register on the map. So at the end of the day, what's really clear is that kind of our own intuition tells us this. For ourselves and for our residents or tenants, they're really not looking for a low flow shower head. They want a great showering experience. The good news is that you can give somebody a great shower head and also save lots of water and energy. And we're going to talk about that more as we go on. So we have to take a look at our behavioral considerations, as I've been talking about. And the real question is, when we have this structure in our homes that we've been talking about, or in our multifamily buildings, and it takes a long time for water to arrive at the point of use, what's our behavior and what do we do? And how is our behavior making the problems even worse? Everybody has this experience of, I have to turn on my shower and then I have to wait for the water to get warm. And so we ask ourselves, and we do surveys all the time here at Evolve to say, well, what are people doing during that inconvenient time? Well, this comes through time and time again when we take a look and we survey, and the numbers come in consistently over the last 10 years. About 71% of people, when you first ask them, what do you do? They'll say, hey, what I do is I do other stuff. I turn on the shower and I go shave, or I go pick out some clothes, or I use the washroom, or I brush my teeth, or I go grab a cup of coffee. I'm doing other things while I'm waiting for that shower to get warm. 52% of people, almost half, and this is on first blush when you ask them, do you do more than one thing? And the truth is, yeah, half people say they do more than one thing. And so what routine, they kind of gauge their behavior of waiting for hot water to the longest time it takes for the hot water to get to their shower. And so if that's like 2 minutes, they walk away for 2 minutes, and maybe their routine is I shave and I go pick out my clothes, or I make my bed and I brush my teeth. And that's your normal routine every morning. What's really funny is this little last statistic. When we ask the people that say the other 50%, basically, that say they're really good and they stand by the shower waiting for it to get warm, when you ask those people, well, hey, are there times when you've left? They'll say, yeah. And so what we find out is that on a consistent or a really regular basis, about 75% of people are flipping on the shower and they're going to do something else while they're waiting for the water to get warm. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Any questions for where we're at? Does it look good, Alexandra?
Yeah, everything looks good. I think your sound is cutting in a little in and out. Might be the internet connection, but I'll let you know if anybody else chimes in.
Yeah, so as a result of our behavior and the structure where it takes a long time for the hot water to get a point of use, what we essentially see is that a shower breaks down into this. I've got 2 minutes of water that's running down the drain and 6 minutes of showering. If you look at all the stats, showers on average last about 8 minutes. So I get 2 minutes, let's just call it a warm-up waste, and I get actual 6 minutes of bathing. It's a pretty large percentage of the shower, 20 to 30%, that's wasted before anybody steps into the shower. And this is a huge opportunity for savings, and I can save water and energy here without having to take anything away from you during the 6 minutes that you're actually in the shower showering. So what I want to show you here is essentially the anatomy of a shower. You're going to see temperature over on the left-hand side. Down at the bottom, we're going to see this time, and you see this kind of dashed line. This is a temperature profile that will show us a typical shower warm-up. Essentially, you see we start at 00 and around 70 degrees. That's the ambient temperature inside the bathroom. Turn on the shower. As the water starts to flow, the temperature actually reduces a little bit because of where the temperature sensor is inside the building envelope, and I start to bring some water in that's actually cooler than the ambient air inside the building. You see flat line, and then at around, say, 35 seconds or so, you're going to start to see a temperature rise. The temperature rises up to the maximum temperature that the water heater essentially is set for, and you start to see a plateau. The plateau that you're seeing here is the maximum temperature that arrived. Then I see another dip down to, say, a temperature of 100 to 105 degrees, and then you see another plateau. That plateau is what we call the bathing temperature plateau. So I can take a look at shower curves like this, and I can see when somebody actually got into the shower, and I can also see how long it took for their hot water to arrive. Essentially, when they get in the shower is when you see the temperature drop off of the maximum temperature plateau down to the bathing temperature plateau. That tells me that somebody actually got in the shower, they adjusted the mixing valve to a temperature that was comfortable to shower in, and then they got in. Now let's talk about the warm-up waste, which is that first water that's going down the drain before they get in. That breaks down into two separate segments. One is structural waste. The structural waste, and we'll talk about this a little bit, but just think of this is the cold water that you have to purge out of the hot water line before hot water can arrive to your shower. This is why you don't get into the shower right away, because you need to get rid of that cold water. That cold water was actually sitting inside your hot water line. And then the hot water arrives, but I'm still away. Why am I still away from the shower? Because I'm going to do other things, because I have to get rid of that structural waste, and I'm busy in the morning and I want to use my time efficiently, and so I go and I do other stuff. So in the total warm-up waste, it breaks down into about 40% of the structural waste, or the cold water that I have to get rid of. But the majority of the water that's wasted during the warm-up is actually hot water. It's hot water that's running down the drain before I step in the shower. It's about 60% of the volume, and on average, it's about 1 minute's worth of hot water for every shower. So your residents are wasting about a minute of hot water on average every time they take a shower, and that's wasted before they actually ever begin showering. So we can take a look at field data and studies that were done by Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. Many of you guys probably recognize the second name on here, Graystar, and then an energy efficiency company called Cadmus, who works on the behalf of Pennsylvania Power and Light. All these groups have done various studies of what does behavioral waste look like, and you can see that the studies come out to somewhere around 60 seconds. I just wanted to show you so you know that it's not just me telling you this. There's third-party verification for everything that I'm telling you about behavior waste. On average, again, like I said before, it's about a minute's worth of hot water that runs down the drain before anybody gets in the shower for every shower that gets taken. The next part I want to get into is a little bit of technical stuff to show you that as we put lower and lower flow rates on our showers, this problem of behavioral waste gets worse. And so I want to take us back a little bit to what we had talked about before in shower head flow rates. Before 1992, shower heads were unregulated and they would just flow as fast as they could flow. When we're talking about water delivery from the water heater to the shower, the water has to go through a pipe. When I'm running water through a pipe, I can have thermal losses in that. And the thermal losses start to really depend on the velocity or how fast the water is moving through the pipe. As you might imagine, the faster I travel through the pipe, the less heat loss I have as the water gets to the shower head. The slower that I move the water through the pipe, the more heat loss I have as the water gets to the shower head. So pre-1992, water was flowing to a shower head at what we would call plug flow. It's around 5 gallons per minute. When I flow this fast, I don't really add any more water to the system or thermal losses that increase the volume of cold water that has to be purged, that structural waste. However, when we start to get into water sense, when we start to get into regulating the shower heads, even at 2.5 gallons per minute, I get what's called a long bullet profile. Essentially, I start to see intermixing in the pipe between the hot water and the cold water that was pre-existing. That intermixing happens in a distance of like 5 to 10 feet. I get a lot of intermingling of the hot and the cold as the hot travels to the shower. I start to have thermal losses. And what actually happens here is I increase the volume of cold water or non-bathing temperature water that needs to be purged from the water line, from the hot water line, by 10 to 50% more than if I was moving at a high volume. So I'm not talking about putting a low flow shower head and just increasing the time. I'm actually increasing the volume of waste, which then exponentially increases the time. We'll get into that in just a second. But when I move into a water sense type of shower head, I get into a situation where the hot starts to slide up over the cold, and this finger, you can see here, this finger of hot water that slides up over the cold can be shooting out 20 feet further out than the main plug of hot water that's in the line. This is that flow rate. Yes, go ahead.
I just want to frame this a little bit differently because this is a really intuitive point if you look at it from a slightly different perspective.
Sure.
And everyone's experienced this at some point or another. You turn the water on, you're waiting for it to get warm. And what happens is it goes from cold water to like lukewarm water, and it stays in that sort of lukewarm, not quite hot period for much longer as the water moves more slowly through the pipe.
Very good. Thank you, Alan. I appreciate that. So when I get to these lower flow rates, and I'm going to show you how quickly they get down on a hot water line. But basically, when I'm moving water at a really slow velocity because I put on, say, 1.5 or a 1.25 gallon shower head, I actually increase the volume that I have to purge from the line by about 50 to 100%. So I'm doubling the volume of structural waste that gets purged. And we run into what I'm going to show you here is a a danger zone. So let's apply what we just learned to water sense types of flow rates, and these would be at to what we're seeing today. As I said before, in California, basically, we're at around a 1.8, 1.75 max. A lot of the utility programs that we're involved in are doing 1.5, and now they're starting to move to 1.25 gallons. Okay, those flow rates are what the manufacturer states their shower head flows at, but that's not what you actually see inside a home. What we're seeing inside a home is something less than that stated flow rate. You'll see it right here. When I take a 1.75, a shower head that's labeled as a 1.75, in someone's home, it's probably realistically flowing at about 1.3. A 1.5 you see translates down to about 1.13. When we're getting into 1.25, I'm flowing at less than a gallon per minute. It starts to get a little bit worse than this, though, when we're talking about flow rates on the hot water line, because when we have a single handle mixing valve, you know how you guys have, we have the handles, we're always mixing in cold water for safety reasons with the single handle mixing valve. So even when you're at full hot, you're mixing in some percentage of cold. When I mix in at full hot, typically I'm at around an 85% hot water, 15% cold water mix. And so the actual volume on the hot water line at a 1.75 GPM shower head is around 1.12. You can see if I'm at 1.5 and 1.25, I'm well below a gallon. This is just really all to illustrate to you that in a real world scenario, today's flow rates that we're putting shower heads in 1.75, 1.5, 1.25s, we're generating hot water flow rates on the hot water line that are at or below a gallon per minute, which really starts to impact what's happening as far as how long we're waiting and what our actual energy and water use is. What's happening, and we're kind of all experiencing this, is waits that used to be around 20 seconds are now about 3 minutes in time. So we're increasing the wait time for hot water to arrive, which is a really huge inconvenience for people, dramatically. This chart here will show you what that looks like, and you start to see this kind of curved linear function. We tend to think if we just throw on a shower head that's lower flow, it's linear, but it's not, because I'm actually increasing the volume of water that has to be purged before hot water arrives. And so at the bottom of this graph, you see flow rates. You see 4 gallons, 3.5, 3, and you see a red line, which is kind of the maximum time it would take for the hot water to reach the shower head, and you see a minimum, which is like about the quickest that it could reach depending on various conditions. And you see this green bar off to the right. That shows us what's happening in the water sense world of shower heads. Let's just call it 2.0 and below. And you can see that I can be waiting at a 1.5, I can be waiting essentially a lot, and it even gets more when we start to get around 1 gallon per minute on the hot water line. Like I said, somebody used to wait in their house or their apartment 20 seconds. Now it's 3 minutes of waiting. You can imagine what that starts to do, not only to water and energy consumption, but people's behavior and how long they're away from the shower. Do we have any questions about this so far? Alexandra, any questions coming in?
You know, not yet, but again, just a reminder for those of you on the call, if you have any questions as we go through, just feel free to put them into the question box so we can answer them as we go along.
All right, thank you. We'll keep moving along. So we're kind of showing you this dynamic that's happening, people's behavior, structure, putting on low flow shower heads, and everything that's happened. So how do you start to elegantly address behavioral issues? And how do we do that while we actually improve the shower experience? It's pretty easy. What I want to introduce to you is something that's called a thermostatic shower valve. We basically call it saying hello to a better shower. And what this allows you to have when you put a little device like this that sits in between the shower head and the shower arm, you can kind of see a depiction over on the right-hand side of the screen, is I've got more hot water, I've got more convenience, and I have more freedom. And that's really what this type of technology allows you to have. It's going to save the water and energy that's getting wasted. It's going to allow you to do what you've always been doing, not having to change your behavior. If you have a routine of walking away and doing something else, that's fine. go do what you always do, and this little thermostatic valve technology will save the water and energy for you, and it doesn't impact the flow of your shower head. So whatever shower head you may already have that you like, that you've settled on for your tenants, or if your tenants or residents have put something in, they're not going to have an impacted shower experience. All they're going to have is more hot water, more convenience, more freedom. So some other additional attributes, and you're kind of already hearing some of these things is that I get my freedom. I can put this technology on. I don't have to change my behavior. So basically now I can multitask or do my routine without having any guilty feelings, without worrying about, hey, am I wasting water, or making this compromise of saying, yeah, you know, I realize I'm wasting water, but my routine is more important to me and I have to be efficient in the morning. And so this allows us to say goodbye to wasted hot water use and all the different things that inconvenience about our showers today, and gain a bunch of freedom. The next thing that's really cool about this is it leaves your shower warm and waiting for you. So what happens is this valve essentially, it stops the hot water from flowing once the hot water arrives, but it allows a little trickle to occur. That trickle basically tells you that your shower is warm and ready, and it also lets you return to the shower when it's convenient for you. The third thing is that, like we said before, I get the perfect flow every single time. This little device, a thermostatic shower valve, doesn't change your shower head feel or flow. So you get the same showering experience while you're showering that you already did. No interruption to what's happening. It works really simply, and I've kind of already alluded to this. Essentially, you install this in between your shower arm and your shower head. Turn on the shower. The cold water or that structural waste, it's going to flow out of the shower head like it always did. Once the hot water arrives, this valve senses the temperature. The ShowerStart technology, or this thermostatic valve technology, kicks in, and it lowers the flow to a trickle. That tells you that your hot water's there. It also keeps your water warm and waiting until you're ready to get in. When you're ready to return to the shower and start taking it, essentially you pull a cord, or you can flip a toggle on it and take your shower as normal, and the shower resets itself for the next use. Any questions?
Troy, I
Yes.
do have a question for you.
Great.
Question here that just came in is, how long do they have for that water to sit in there warm? Is there a time limit?
Yeah. So I don't have a specific answer. It depends on a number of different factors. Okay. But what I will tell you is, explain to you how this valve works a little bit. There's a thermostat in the valve. The thermostat in the valve is activated by the hot water. Essentially, there's this really cool technology where there's a copper cup inside this valve, and as the water flows over this copper cup, there's a wax. It's a highly specialized wax that's designed to melt in a very specific temperature range. So the wax melts. When the wax changes phase from a solid to a liquid, it has to expand. On the other end of this copper cup, there's a rubber membrane, and so as the wax expands, there's a piston on the other end of that rubber membrane, which then pushes out, and that triggers the shutoff. So now when that happens, I'm in this trickle mode. So it really depends on how far my run is, or what the ambient temperature is, or what the insulation is, of how long that water will take to cool off with the trickle. If somebody is away for, I don't know, realistically, let's just say if they're gone for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, their water's still going to probably be pretty warm. If they're gone for 20 minutes, not so much, because it will eventually start to cool off. What would happen if somebody was away and the water cooled off to, let's just say, below 95, which is kind of where we trigger? What would happen is the cold water would flow out again, and then the warm water would arrive again, and I would trigger the shutoff, and you'd go through this cycle kind of over and over again. When we've experimented with this, I would tell you that it's probably in the 20-25 minute range that you start to get this cycle. Again, that could depend upon a number of conditions. In the winter, for example, if you're in a northern state where it's colder and maybe there's not as much insulation in the building, because it might be an older building and not as efficient, that cycle would happen longer, would happen more quickly because the water would cool off more quickly than if you were in a warmer climate or had some different conditions. Is that,
Got it.
that,
Yeah,
that
I think that definitely makes sense. That's a great answer. And also another question from Linda here is this compatible with Moen single handle fixtures? Are you familiar with that brand?
when you say single handle fixtures, are we talking about a
Uh,
mixing?
Linda said Moen, M-O-E-N,
Uh,
Moen single handle fixtures.
so I'm not quite sure what she means. I know Mo and I know the brand. Let me answer the question this way. This valve uses industry standard connections. The industry standard connection is called a 1/2 inch NPT, national pipe thread. So any standard shower that you can basically go to the hardware store and buy anywhere will work with this type of technology. Basically, there's a standard interface, standard thread size for all shower arms and for all shower heads. Can you run into some highly specialty stuff? It's a little bit different. Yes, you can. But are we talking about compatibility with 95% plus of everything that's out there? Yeah, we are. So, for example, this technology is used, as we said earlier, in the largest energy efficiency programs in the country. We've sold millions and millions of these these valves without any compatibility issues at all. Does that answer the question well enough, or is there something more specific?
Well, I think if we have a specific one that comes up, I'll go ahead and let you know after the webinar, and we could
Yeah.
address any
Okay.
specific ones that you all on the call might have questions about.
Great. So I guess this is time for poll question number 1, which is, would you be interested in receiving more information on thermostatic shutoff valves?
Yeah, and I also want to take this opportunity to point out that Troy has given us some handouts on the side of your screen that you can download. And I already got a comment from somebody saying that they're very thankful for it and they think they're very informative. So I assume some of you have seen them already. But I think if you could describe some of the handouts that you might have there that are related to the TSVs here, I think that might be helpful, Troy.
Yeah, so, and quite honestly, Alexander, I sent those last week and I don't remember the specific ones that I sent, but basically, I believe that I gave you data sheets that will give you kind of the functional and the specs for any of the types of technologies or products that we're going to talk about in the presentation. I believe I also gave you a white paper that demonstrates savings that we're actually going to walk through in the presentation that will show you this stuff really does save, and it's quantified in multifamily, and we'll get into details about that. It's all highly relevant stuff. So it's about specifications, about function. You'll see what these products look like, get all the information. Then you're going to receive some real third-party data, real-world scenarios of how they've saved and how much they've saved.
Okay, I just closed out that question, so you can go ahead and move forward with the presentation, Troy.
All right, great. Yeah, absolutely. So when we take this thermostatic valve technology and we integrate it into a tub spout, and think of this being used in a tub shower combo, where you've got basically a tub that you step in, and it's a bathtub and it's also a shower. We really start to change the equation of how much of that behavioral waste we can save. Before, we were talking about with just a thermostatic shutoff valve at the shower head, we could save about a minute. It's worth of hot water. But when you flow that quote unquote minutes worth of hot water through a tub spout, it flows at 5 gallons per minute, 4.5 to 5 gallons per minute, versus flowing through a shower head at say 1.5 gallons per minute, we start to radically change the equation of how much water and energy that we can save. And so we're able to save, by warming up through the tub spout, about 85% of the warm-up waste volume versus about 60% that we talked about before. And I'll get in and show you how this technology starts to work. But basically, the combination of a TSV technology integrated into a tub spout gives you 4 really unique opportunities for saving water and energy. One is we actually are going to reduce the volume of the cold water that has to be purged before hot water can arrive by around 1/2 gallon. That's because we're flowing at these really high velocities instead of the low velocity that goes through the shower head. We're going to eliminate the behavioral waste because this technology is going to sense when the hot water arrives and stop it from flowing until somebody's ready to shower. Huge savings here. We're talking around 5.1 gallons. We have shower heads that, for low flow shower heads, and we can get in more to this in follow-up information, perform really, really well, which is why our technologies and our products are using these energy efficiency programs. I can give you really high performance shower heads that people will like at lower flow rates. So when we're talking about an efficient shower, or that 6 minutes of time that you're showering, we can save around 6 gallons in that time. And our technology is really unique in that it stops what we call a tub spout leak. Let me explain that for a second. I'm not talking about a tub spout that just happens to be leaking when nobody's in here. I'm talking about a tub spout that leaks while you're actually taking a shower. Most diverters on a tub spout, when you pull them up, they don't engage 100%. And so water actually is running out of the tub spout while you're taking a shower, or water's running out of the tub spout while water is running out of the shower. The average leak is actually pretty significant. And if you have a leaking tub spout, basically you're probably wasting around 4.5 gallons of water that's running out of the tub spout while you're showering. You total all this up in these unique areas that we can save, and a tub spout with thermostatic technology in it can save about 16 gallons per shower. It's absolutely tremendous what it can save. Here's how it works. Essentially, you turn on your water. The cold water exits out of the tub spout. Because the thermostatic technology is in the tub spout, when the hot water arrives, it shuts off the flow, and no flow will run out of the tub spout anymore. This causes the water to automatically be diverted up to the shower head. The shower head then is a specialized shower head in that it will only trickle until you trigger it to flow at its normal flow rate. This is where the trickle part comes in. So while you're away, the shower isn't just running endlessly. The water's just trickling out. Then you, again, toggle that switch or pull that cord, shower as usual. The whole system resets itself for the next user. If you
And
want to...
Troy, real quick from Tina, she's asking here, related to this drip, if nobody comes back to actually take the shower, what if they leave for too long and they completely forget? Is there something in place that will eventually shut it off, or would the tenant have to go back to turn it off?
The tenant would have to turn it off. Like we talked about before, essentially what would happen is, over a period of, say, 30 minutes, it would enter into a cycle where it would trickle, and then it would start to flow again because the water behind the valve cooled off. Water would come out of the tub spout. Hot water would arrive very, very quickly. And because we're talking about purging we're running at like 5 gallons per minute out of the tub spout, and the unit would basically go to a trickle again, very, very fast, because of the volume that's purging through the tub spout. So this isn't a system where you just leave the valves open. You basically behave the way that you always do. Just like today, you turn on your shower and you turn off your shower. This isn't introducing anything new into that concept. What it's really doing is it's stopping hot water from running down the drain during that period of time that you're away. I understand the concern. We haven't seen it being a problem in the how long have we been selling into the utility programs, Alan? Probably 9 years now. We haven't really seen it be an issue at all during that time frame. We've done lots and lots of multifamily within our utility programs. Alan, do you have any extra comments you want to add to that?
I could. Yeah, there's a sort of another way to look at that trickle. And the example that I would use comes from an assisted living owner that contacted us. And their experience was they had tenants that would turn on their shower or their tub, and then they would get distracted by a phone call or a knock on the door or something. And they would wind up leaving the tub or the shower running while they had physically left their unit. And what happened in one scenario was they completely drained a commercial boiler. So this is just hot water running down the drain for some period of time. And the other example was the same scenario, except the water that was running through the tub eventually, the drain couldn't keep up with it, and eventually the water was overflowing into the bathroom. And this particular bathroom just happened to be on the third floor. So by the time they figured out where all the water was coming from, you can imagine the damage that had been done in the building underneath it. So there's actually a benefit to the, we'll call it safety, but it's probably an economic benefit to having this thing be able to stay in this trickle mode sort of indefinitely.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on that?
No, not that I see. Go ahead.
We go down. Great. So poll question number 2, would you be interested in receiving more information on tub spouts with TSVs?
Going back to the handouts while this is up here, this system, the tub spout system, is referred to in the handouts as the ADTS system, auto diverting tub spout.
Gotcha. And also for those of you who are commenting that you can't download the handouts, that's okay. I'm sorry if it's not showing up for you, but tomorrow when I send you the recording, I'm also going to send you a link to the handouts. So you guys can download them tomorrow off of that email that I'm going to send to you. And because they are really good. I've looked at them. So I definitely want you guys to take advantage of that. So I'll send it tomorrow in the email. All right, so let's close out this poll question and keep moving forward. All right, Troy.
Yeah, so what we want to show you next is a case study from a complex called Applegate Apartments. There's 156 units in Frederick, Maryland, and they installed our auto diverting tub spout system, or a tub spout with TSV technology integrated into it. The owner of the property is Maryland Management. Again, it's located in Frederick, Maryland. It's an older complex, had 2 buildings, like I said before, 156 apartment units. They installed the units in the summer of 2016. Now, in the data that we show, and I want to point this out, we aren't going to show any savings or see any savings in their data on the shower head portion of the system. And that's because they had already done let's just call it a low flow shower head in their units. And even though they went to our 1.5 gallon shower head, we weren't going to pick up any savings, but they did get a shower head that the residents liked better than what they had before because of the way ours performs. But there's no savings pickup on the actual shower head itself. So the data that we're going to show you, we're getting savings from reducing the volume of the structural waste, reducing the behavioral waste, and eliminating the tub spout leak, but we're not getting any pickup or credit for the shower head. And it's really important to point that out because you're going to see tremendous results without even having a shower head considered in the mix. So your scenario could show way more savings than what I'm going to show to you. Also, it's important to understand that no additional modifications were made to the property where there was anything else going on that would impact this data. All they did is they put in our auto diverting tub spout system. This is basically just what I had just explained. So we get the savings in structural waste, we get the savings in behavioral waste, 0 savings associated with the shower head, 4.5 gallons on the tub spout leak. So in this on this property, the savings potential was about 10 gallons per shower rather than the 16 we talked about before. If we could pick up the shower head because maybe you already had a 2.5 or a 2.0, we'd increase the savings by around 33%. So in looking at the complex, we wanted to make some estimations based off of what we know about behavior and what we know about the dynamics of what we would predict this system would save on that property. And so when you plug in all the numbers, basically in a year, we predicted that they would save around 3/4 million gallons of water per year. That was the prediction before the installation took place. And this next chart here shows us what they actually saved. And so we were able to take a look at all of their water bills and say, hey, this is the water consumption in the year prior to use. And then we looked at the water consumption for the first year after install. We saved on that property, and this is occupancy adjusted because we needed to adjust a little bit for variances in occupancy, but basically savings were slightly better or right around essentially what our prediction is. They were able to reduce their total volume of water consumption on the property by around 7% just by installing this system. So a 7% total water savings on this property through putting in an auto diverting tub spout. Poll question number 3. Would you be interested in receiving a calculator to estimate savings for property?
Okay, just going to give you guys about another minute here, maybe 30 seconds to answer. And for those of you who aren't answering, just to let you know, you would not receive the calculator estimate savings, so be sure to put it in as a yes if you want us to contact you to send some of that calculator information there. And the calculator too, I'm curious, Troy, is that something they can just use online, or is it like an app that they can download?
Yeah, we can send you a link to do it online. That's how we would send it out. Once you do it, you can click a button and it will send you an email with the results, or you can always go back in there. The calculator is set for a bunch of defaults, but in working with either Alan or Norma or Katie, we can get into highly specific information about your property to really dial it in. I mean, we can get into inlet water temperatures. There's a number of factors where we can start to get incredibly specific. So you can start out by putting in a little information and getting back a general type of answer of what the expectation be, but it's also sophisticated enough to get very specific for your property.
Great. Okay, well, let's go forward from here.
Okay, great. This is just to show you a little bit back. We talked about how many gallons they save. Let's just call it 3/4 million gallons. They reduce water consumption by 7%. But that's just how many gallons they saved. What does that look like from a cost perspective? So we're able to take a look at all of their bills, and essentially their water and sewer on a cost per gallon was a little bit more than a penny. It's not quite a penny and a half. The auto diverting tub spout system costs about $60 wholesale for them to put in. So you can run all of your calculations to figure out what the payback is on putting in this system. And if you're just looking at occupancy adjusted, we're talking about this system can pay for itself in somewhere between 9 and 11 months, depending on the number of factors, whether we're adjusting for occupancy or we're not adjusting for occupancy. Essentially, what you've got here is a system that pays for itself very quickly. Useful life on a product like this is going to be somewhere between, say, 7 to 10 years. So it's going to keep performing and pay itself back in less than 1 year. And that's just on the water side. We'll start to talk about the energy side here in just a minute. So on an ROI, what this looked like for Applegate, just on saving water on the water side, basically their water and sewer bill, essentially $10,000 a year, it was 109% ROI first year. Very, very, very good return on investment. Let's start to throw in energy, because obviously the way we make hot water is we apply energy to it. It could be either gas or electric. And depending on Applegate basically wasn't picking this up for themselves, but tenants were getting a benefit of the energy savings because the way that they did water heating in their building. Basically, what I'm showing you here is based on the number of gallons that were saved. With electric, it would translate in their scenario to about $11,000 saved on the electric side. If you were going to be using gas for the gallon saved, it's about $4,000 saved on the energy side. So again, you get a savings. You're not just saving water and saving money on water and sewer, but depending on the scenario, either you're directly getting the benefit of the energy savings if the energy is included in their bills and the tenant isn't paying that, the resident isn't paying that directly, or your tenant is getting the benefit because they're reduced reduced energy bills. It's a significant pickup. So our next question, poll question number 4 is, would you be interested in receiving a free product sample? And that could be either a TSV, the thermostatic shutoff valve that just applies to the shower head, or a tub spout with the TSV technology included in it.
And Troy, while we're on this question, I got another question here from Tina.
Okay.
How realistic is 0.75 shower per day assumption?
It's very realistic. So that's the type of number that our utility companies we work with use. They validate all of the savings on their own. And statistically, if you look at data of how frequently people shower, that number is a pretty solid number. You'll see a little bit of variance, but it's around 3/4 of a shower per person per day on average.
Gotcha. Okay, closing out the poll question here.
We'll move on. Oh, I went one too far. So we're starting to see a lot of interest over the last year and a half, particularly in our technologies and our products in multifamily, because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have introduced what we call green loans. And maybe some of the people that are listening to the presentation are already aware of these, but there's programs out by Fannie and Freddie that will give you preferential loan pricing. They'll give you a free water and energy audit that's paid by Fannie or Freddie. They'll give you additional loan proceeds to help pay for improvements that would impact water and energy usage on the property. Alan, do you want to jump in and talk a little bit more about what's happening in these green loans and what you're seeing in multifamily?
Well, I think you probably covered it. I think the really exciting part of this is that they're creating mechanisms to fund improvements on properties to reduce consumption of utilities. There are some requirements, but like Troy pointed out, they will put extra proceeds in the loan or provide other mechanisms so that you don't have a significant out-of-pocket if you're refinancing, for example, or if you're trying to bring a new property into your portfolio. So these are really powerful programs. They also give you some time once you've qualified for the loan to get the work done. So you can figure out, the auditors will come in and do an audit on the building. They'll sort of lay out a menu of possible things that you can do to the property in order to meet the requirements of the loan. And some of them are identified here in red. You have to demonstrate the work that you're going to be doing to the property that will reduce energy and water consumption by at least 30%, half of which has to be on the energy consumption, on the energy side. So where a lot of these buildings run into some challenges is maybe this building has already had some basic, what I'll call weatherization done to it. There's already low flow shower heads, maybe there's low flow aerators, maybe there's the new low flow toilets or some other things like that. And in order to qualify for the loan, you have to figure out a way to reduce consumption by a further 30%. And so products like the tub spout system that we've been talking about here, or the TSV, are ways to get that done.
I also want to take this opportunity to point out that there are, if anybody's looking at building new and doing LEED or retrofitting to get a LEED designation on your building, there's a mechanism within LEED to receive between 6 and 12 points with our thermostatic shutoff valve technology. So you can get points within LEED for your building by putting this type of technology in. So the last poll question, would you like to talk to an Evolve representative to learn more?
Great. And then also want to take this opportunity to tell you guys to not be shy. Put in your questions here for Troy and Alan as we start to finish up. We're reaching the 1 hour mark, but I suppose since we've been answering questions, as they've been coming in, the Q&A portion might be a little shorter. So if you have any other last minute questions, go ahead and put them in because we're going to probably start answering them soon. Is that right, Troy?
Yeah, no, we're basically at the end, so we can move on to questions.
Great. So I have another question from Tina is how many gallons per hour is lost in the drip for the shower? Have you
Yeah,
guys measured that and the tub as well?
yeah. Well, the tub doesn't drip. The only thing that would drip is the shower head. There's going to be some variance based on the pressure in your building, but essentially it's less than 1/10 of 1 gallon per minute. And you actually want to have that drip to occur. When we first designed these products and were developing them years and years ago, we had them completely shut off the water. It's not good for your plumbing system to have the line open in a mixing valve where you could have crossover between hot and cold. And the drip is actually important for code and to prevent that from happening. It's small. It's less than 1/10 of a gallon per minute.
And another question from Gordon is what about the use of a hot water circulation pump?
Dynamics on those are pretty unique. I would love it, we can get into a ton of detail on that side of things. Essentially, that I would tell you is that a hot water recirc loop is really nice from a convenience perspective. But two things happen. There's a tremendous amount of energy loss recirculating that water through the pipe. They're highly, highly inefficient. And on average, they only reduce the wait for hot water to arrive by about 50% of what the typical would have been because of dynamics. In a loop, the loop isn't getting all the way to the shower, and so I still have a line that I have to purge before the hot water. And that typically that amount of time or the volume that I have to get rid of is enough because hot water is not there right away to encourage somebody to walk away and do something else. And so we don't find them to be, in all of the studies that we've done, to be highly effective in modifying people's behavior of walking away. And there's a tremendous energy expense associated with having that water circulate around in that loop.
Okay. So that was the last question that I saw come through. I'm going to just give another minute here for you guys to enter in any further questions and just close this up in the meantime by reminding you again, I'm going to be sending a recording tomorrow. We're going to be providing you with the Evolve Technologies team contact info. So if you do have questions later, you can reach out to them directly. I'll also put in the handouts so you guys can download those later if you didn't get a chance to download those today. And if you also want a certificate for completing this webinar, I'd be happy to provide you with any proof that you need to show that you attended and the entire webinar today. And with that being said, I don't see any other questions coming through, so I think we've addressed everything so far. Troy and Alan, thank you so much for coming on. This was super informative, and we're really happy to have had you. And I'm sure everyone here on the call learned a lot. I mean, I definitely didn't know most of this stuff. So thank you again for coming on and doing this.
Thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate it, and look forward to hearing from people, and we'll follow up diligently on all the poll questions and get you the other information that you requested today, Alexandra.
All right, fantastic, guys. Everyone have a wonderful day. Take
All
care.
right, thank you.